What's the most you've seen someone change from high school to your class reunion? A girl I went to school with was always picked on because her parents were poor. Her mother worked in a minimum wage job and her dad didn't work at all. To be honest, I don't know how people even noticed her enough to bully her, as she was always quiet and came in and out of class unnoticed. Even the teachers didn't pay attention to her. She was left behind the class all the time. At school she always, I hate to say this, took the bullying and never once ever complained. That's the best way I can describe it. I remember her as always of average looks and intelligence while we were at school and very skinny. Once we left school, everybody went their separate ways. Last year she surfaced on Facebook with a family. And also a degree from Cambridge University. It turns out she had joined the army and went through officer training at Sandhurst and is a captain in the Army Air Corps. She has pictures of her tours in Iraq and Afghanistan. The quiet girl who got bullied was a very intelligent, tough person. Who I suppose we all want to be ourselves. It was nice to see. People no longer on speaking terms with their former best friend for life. What happened? This happened when I was 17. My boyfriend was 20. My best friend was 18. I had dated him for 3 years at that point, and my best friend vehemently hated him the entire time. One day, she told me my boyfriend had been texting her and they had plans to meet up that afternoon to have sex, but she couldn't and had to tell me. We went over to his place. She went in first. And I told her to text me when he started making moves. I get the text. Knock on his door. He opens and says, "You shouldn't be here," before slamming the door in my face. I knock again and I say, "I know she's in there. We came together. It's over." We leave together, and that was it for me and him. It was over for her and I when she started dating him a week later. 7 years of friendship gone like that. She was a snake. I guess it was jealousy, or maybe they had been hooking up together long before that. I'm not sure. They aren't together anymore, but they lead similar, unhappy lives. I am with a good man who loves me, and we have been together 6 years now. What was your worst sleepover experience during your childhood? We were 13, I would guess. Normally I would always stay at my friend's place, but this time we stayed at mine. My parents took us to the bar, which was something people did at the time. Well, my father decided to get blackout drunk, and us two 13-year-olds were stuck in a bar. It was getting pretty uncomfortable between the parents and even some of the other people in the bar. 'Cause it wasn't appropriate to have a couple of 13-year-olds in a bar on a Friday night at 1 a.m. So when my father got up to use the bathroom, my mom grabbed us and we ran out to the van. He came out screaming through a beer and was banging on the van, screaming all sorts of obscenities. Well, we get home, get some dinner finally, and my mom goes to bed. My friend and I decide to watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit in the living room, which I never got to use. But hey, Dad is gone. Well, an hour later he shows up. And he just sits on the couch and smokes pot until falling asleep an hour later. So we sneak off to my room, and my friend's parents picked us up to stay at his place. And that was the last time I ever had a friend over. 911 operators. What are some of the funniest things someone has called in for? It was Father's Day, mind you. Had this 5-year-old kid call in at least 6 times, but he'd never stay on the line long enough for us to get a good ping on his cell phone. We were finally able to get him to stay on the phone long enough by talking about how his teddy bear was sick. We asked to speak to his parents and he told us they were in bed and the door was locked. So we asked him to go knock on the door. He then told us he had been locked in his room. Okay. I think we know what's going on now. By this point we had an officer en route to this kid's house to go make sure everything was okay. The officer arrives on scene. A few minutes go by. Then the officer comes over the radio and says S-120 back in service. The teddy bear is 10-4. The officer made his way up to the comm center and proceeded to tell us all that the kid's dad answered the door wearing only boxer shorts and was more than a little agitated when he found out his son had been calling 911. Apparently the dad had been getting his Father's Day gift from Mom when the officer showed up. What is the best conversation you accidentally overheard? Was on the bus and a small girl and her father were sitting in front of me. The kid was misbehaving a bit and wouldn't sit still even though her father would tell her to settle down several times. Eventually he lets out an exasperated, "Why won't you do what I tell you to?" And the little girl answers, matter-of-factly, "Mom always tells you to stop washing your balls in the sink, but you still do it." Needless to say, they got off that bus very quickly, as every single person around them was desperately trying not to laugh. Who is the most badass person you've ever met? My late father-in-law. Age 13, the Russians came into his village of ethnic Germans in what is now Serbia. Shot his father in the front parlor. Dragged the whole family off and put them in death camps where they were worked to death bit by bit. He escaped from the camp 3 times. Recaptured and beaten almost to death. They kept them alive because they could repair electric circuits. Finally escaped. And smuggled the whole family of 7 out of there. Finally ended up in a US-run displaced persons camp. Worked as a welder and ran a cleaning business. Bought a house. Raised 2 children and sent them to college. Never became a citizen because he never learned to read or write English. Dying of emphysema. He got a notice that ICE was thinking of deporting him because he had let his green card lapse. I drove him up to the federal building and wheeled him in his wheelchair. The officious clerk said, "So we may have to deport you." I laughed and said, "To where?" "Read his green card. Citizen of no country. Surviving that kind of childhood and then living a good life. Total badass." What is the most disturbing thing to know? I looked after terminally ill people who had chosen to die at home after being discharged from hospital. After a while, you learn some signs that people are deteriorating. You start to learn how long people generally have left. I always went with honesty. I felt it was my job to support the patients' families as well as the patients. So if they asked how long I thought they had left, I would answer honestly based on my previous experiences. The wife of one of my patients told me that their children were visiting the following weekend to say their goodbyes. I chose to recommend that they visit the following day. I regretted saying it because she was devastated. She took my advice and her husband passed away peacefully 48 hours later, after seeing his kids. I'm glad I did it. But upsetting that lady was absolutely gut-wrenching. Some people didn't want to know. That was the worst. In those cases, you had to not say anything. Sometimes they'd say, "See you tomorrow," and I had to reply, "Yes. Have a good night," knowing full well that they were going to pass in the night. What is the worst party you have ever attended? I was invited to a sleepover in high school. The girl was a bit bratty, but she lived in this huge lakefront house and everyone wanted to go because they wanted to sleep in her mom's mansion. This sleepover party turns into a rich kid brag fest. She wouldn't let any of us touch anything she owned because it was hers. Her mom ordered pizzas for us and had bought wine coolers. We were all about 14 to 16. The girl dictated that we were to only have 2 pieces each because she didn't want fat friends. We played truth or dare afterwards and we dared this girl to eat a 3rd slice of pizza as a joke. She got so pissed off that she started crying, stomped off to her room and locked the door. She didn't come out for the rest of the night. But we heard her screaming and throwing things. The mom came downstairs and unlocked her door, trying to calm her down. The rest of us sat around, shocked at her behavior. And a few of us called our parents, asking for them to come pick us up. I don't think the girl ever recovered from this mishap. She eventually went on to be a hard drug user in her late teens. People who have completely ruined somebody's life. What happened and why did you do it? I sent an anonymous tip into the police that this guy had a significant amount of drug in a hidden compartment in his car and that he regularly sold them to underage teens. I also tipped them off that he was driving without a valid license in case they needed a reason to pull him over. These tips, inevitably, led to him being investigated, arrested, charged, and sentenced to a significant number of years in prison. Why did I do it? He was in a relationship with a family member of mine for several years and was emotionally abusive and controlling to her throughout. No matter what he did to her, she refused to leave him. Then she discovered he was cheating and confronted him, at which point the abuse turned physical. He became increasingly violent after that. She didn't want to report any of it because she didn't want to start any drama with his family and she didn't want anyone to know what was going on. A few years after he went away, she met a genuinely great guy who treats her well and she's happier than I ever saw her. I don't regret what I did at all. What did a teacher do that made you automatically gain respect for them? When I was in the 1st grade, my mother gave me one of many really awful haircuts. The first day back at school afterward, the kids picked on me horribly. So much that I ran out and hid. The principal found me and we went back to the classroom and he asked me to wait outside for a minute while he talked to the class. He then walked me to his office and bought me a Coke. The next day, first thing in the morning, we had an assembly with the entire school and he walked up on stage with his head shaved completely bald and talked about bullying and the like. Some 20 years down the road he had retired and I ran into him at the local college. Shook his hand and said, "You probably don't remember me. But yes, I do." He interrupted and said my name and the event. The man was and is a hero in my eyes. What's the biggest I'm a princess red flag? Really liked this girl in high school. She literally took my breath away. I thought she was so beautiful. I did odd jobs in order to save up enough money to take her on a proper date. Date night rolls around and I go to pick her up and 2 of her female friends are coming with us, which I had no idea about. We get to the movie theater and they don't have any money, so I am paying for all 4 of us. I was careful with my purchase, so I have money left for the dinner. Movie ends and I explain that dinner really needs to be just the 2 of us. And she basically tells me that's not happening. As a result, we end up having to go to this greasy spoon little dive in a strip mall. I gotta be honest. By the end of the night I was struggling to hold back tears. I was ashamed. But even more, I was angry. This girl had no idea how hard I had worked in order to treat her to a nice date. But she taught me a valuable lesson. People who complain about things given to them for free are literally the worst people in existence. Same for people who show no consideration for the feelings and expectations of others. Both are huge red flags. Girls. What is something guys shouldn't feel insecure about? A good example is actually happening right now. I'm at a pool party. Two very nice overweight guys are in the pool, but they are both wearing t-shirts to cover their guts and just standing around. Then there is a third heavyset guy who easily has an extra 40 pounds on the other two guys. He is shirtless, having the time of his life, playing with a band in the pool basketball game and cracking jokes. He is way more attractive to the girls because he isn't ashamed of his body and exudes confidence. No one should feel bad about themselves based on how they look or their skills. Should all three lose weight? Sure. Most of us should. But don't stop having fun because you are ashamed of yourself. Live your life and have fun. This is very attractive to all people. Just my opinion. I'm a middle-aged woman and I think I have a bit of wisdom about things like this. I've seen some shit, huh? What is the most satisfying time you've caught someone in a lie? One time my family's company was throwing a company Christmas party at an upscale restaurant in NYC. I'm there with several members of my family having a good time, enjoying some food and drinks, and getting to know people in the company. I'm sitting at a table with several employees I had just met, and two of my cousins who worked with them, when two guys come up to our table and introduce themselves. They were professionally dressed, were quite friendly. They start asking people what they do, and were trying to act pretty alpha. They asked me what I did, which was graphic design at the time, and kinda laughed at my career choice. So being a few drinks and I ask what they do at the company, and they say that their family owns the business. I take a long look at the two of them, take a sip off my drink, and say, "Oh really? I must have missed you at the last family reunion. By the way, I'm Theodore Company's name. Nice to meet you." The look on their faces was priceless. They put down their drinks and just walked out. What have you accidentally trained your pet to do? Not me, but my husband. Our dog has been lazy since the beginning. When our dog was a puppy and would fall asleep downstairs, my husband would carry him up to our room to bed. This happened quite a few times, and now our fully grown 4-year-old 50-pound dog thinks the way to go to bed is by my husband carrying him. When my husband is home, he never tries to go to the bed by himself. He waits for my husband to tell him that it's bedtime, and then he flops over and lifts his front and back paws up so my husband can scoop him up into his arms. He only does this for my husband. If husband is not home for bedtime, the dog will sulk for a bit and then slowly walk upstairs and put himself to bed by turning to face the wall and loudly sigh. Also, he hides in my closet. Purposely now. Because I would coax him out of there with treats. So now whenever I go near the bedroom, he runs quickly to dive in the closet, only to re-emerge a few seconds later. Then he comes out complaining when he doesn't get any reward. Lol. Girls, did you ever have a guy that you wished you said yes to when he asked you out? It was freshman year of college. I made eye contact with some random guy from across the quad. He walked over, sat next to me, and we had a short conversation. We went out for lunch and it was really amazing. It felt like I've known this guy forever. We also had some drinks and I was very comfortable and happy with him. He invited me to his room before my friends showed up and dragged me away. Turned out we lived in the same building. I went to his room, and we talked and joked as though we'd known each other our entire lives. And constantly, this kick-ass engineer student was complimenting me, the mediocre biology kid, on how smart I was. He and I ran into each other several times, and there was always a palpable tension between us. But I was in a long-distance relationship at the time and I never went for it. And I found out later my then-boyfriend who lived far away was never serious about me. He was cheating throughout the whole time. I turned down the only guy to ever give me butterflies in my stomach and make me smile like an idiot.